Greetings, everybody. This is Winnie Wriggle, and welcome back to Edentech. We are in episode 17, and today we are going to build a turbine as part of the Extreme Reactors mod. And I'm actually going to do this block by block to the best of my ability. We have in our power building a reactor, and this reactor is, I have it turned off right now, but it is capable of producing approximately 1,800 millibuckets of steam per tick. So we need to build a turbine that can handle that amount of steam. So the idea is that we provide the reactor with a water source. So you push water into the reactor superheats the water and produces steam, and you take that steam out into a turbine. So that steam makes the turbine spin, and if you have a coil on that turbine, it produces RF. And then you take that steam back, like it's in the turbine, it is processed back into water, and so you feed it back into the reactor to reheat the water, right? So you're cooling the water because it's condensing from steam to water. So there is a closed system that you make between a reactor and a turbine that we're going to build below it. But we're going to have to start by providing the reactor with water. So let me show you the list of materials that we have for today to build our turbine. Quite a bit of turbine glass, almost 6 stacks. 2.5 stacks of turbine housing, and you need housing to make your turbine glass. So if we go to Extreme Reactors and look at the recipes for these real quick. Here's your turbine housing. It's just iron and graphite, and then these things. Turbine housing core, which is the same thing, iron, graphite, gold, and a redstone comparator, which is just redstone torches, nether quartz, and some stone. And then you add a glass to that to get the turbine glass. So see, there's the turbine housing with a couple pieces of glass. We also need turbine rotor blades. This is why we started our reactor sooner. Like, we can't build a turbine until the reactor's been running for a while, because these turbine rotor blades require cyanite ingots, which is one of the things that we get as waste product from the reactor. So we had to wait till we had enough cyanite to get just over a stack of turbine rotor blades. There's 72 turbine rotor blades. Each rotor blade is capable of processing 25 millibuckets of steam. And so those total 72 can approximately handle about 1,800 millibuckets of steam. So we need that many in order to handle the steam that's coming out of the reactor, which is part of the reason I had to lower the floor in here. In order to have all of those rotor blades in here, I needed 3 extra blocks depth on our turbine. The other pieces that we need for the turbine itself, you need a rotor bearing. So all those turbines have to spin, and they spin on rotor shafts. So a rotor shaft goes right through the middle of the build. And then, of course, we need inputs and outputs for the fluid. So the turbine has an input and an output fluid port. And then the reactor has an input and an output fluid port. It says coolant. We're going to use water as the coolant. So I think the first thing to do is let's build the structure of our turbine. And we're going to start with the turbine housing, because where it goes is important. So I've put, these are 4 pieces of turbine housing so we can see how big this is going to be. And it is the interior is, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 blocks. So inside is a 7 by 7. Remember, our reactor is a 9 by 9 inside. So for your turbine, the floor, no matter what orientation you make it, the floor needs to be turbine housing. Something about that, it doesn't like glass on the quote-unquote lowest gravitational part. Then we're going to make a frame of turbine housing all the way up to within 1 block the reactor. So I'm making this, it should be 11 high on the inside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then the top. So we go up basically 12 from the bottom on each one. And then so we're just making a big giant rectangle, right? And we do the same thing on all 4 corners. You must have turbine housing as the edges. You can put glass in between them, but all of your edges have to be turbine housing, just like the reactor. Okay, so there's our housing. Now we get to put in our glass. I'm gonna put in the back row. And this is literally, we're just gonna fill in the entire side on all 4 sides with glass, and then I'll come back and put our ports in the right place. Now we have 4 solid glass walls. And now on the top, we're going to fill this whole thing in with glass. Oh! We don't need these. We're going to replace them with other blocks, but right there. Okay, so now we are standing inside a giant glass box. Woo! Okay, so that is the basic construct for your turbine housing, right? So we have the turbine housing on the edges and the glass in the middle. So now let's hop out of here. And let's place our important blocks. Actually, let's go to this one. So the very center of our turbine is right here underneath me. And what we want to do is put our rotor shaft in the ceiling on that block. In fact, I'm just going to get all of this stuff because we're going to need it. So here's our center block. So if I look straight up from here, turbine rotor bearing, bloop. Okay, and as you can imagine, our rotor shafts get connected to the rotor bearing. So we just take these and run them right down the middle all the way to the floor. So you need as many rotor shafts as your turbine is high. Right? Okay, next up, we need a solid block of coolant in order to help handle the temperatures that this thing produces. We are going to use Enderium. Ludicrite is actually the best option for this, but we haven't had the reactor running long enough to make Ludicrite. Ludicrite requires plutonium. Plutonium requires almost an entire block's worth of cyanide. So we're not there yet. We have the Nether Star, the Ender Pearls, and the blocks of Emerald, but we do not have the plutonium. And sadly, you cannot grow it using mystical agriculture. So instead, we're going to use Enderium. And we're going to make 4 layers of 8 blocks around the bottom of the shaft in order to make the coil. Yay! There is a coil that will help cool the turbine so it doesn't overheat. Okay, now we're going to put blades on the turbine. It is very important that you start your blade placement one block above where your coil is. You want to leave that block of air so that your blades don't drag on the coil and cause overheating. You don't want your RPMs too high. You can see the blades placed like a block. We're going to do them. They go in a cross pattern. Don't worry if they look funky like this. Oops. They still need to be in a little row. Don't worry if they look funky. That's just a graphical glitch. As you add them, they'll line up. All right, gotta get out of the way. There we go. Might be easier to do this above them. There we go. So see how they all lined up? Now they look like a blade. So we're gonna do this 6 times. And go all the way up to the top. Okay, that is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shafts worth of rotor blades. Each has 3 on a side times 4. So each layer has 12 blades. So it's 6 times 3 times 4 is 72 blades. And each blade handles 25 millibuckets of steam. So that is the completed structure for the actual turbine itself, including the coil, the blades, the shaft, and basically the drive shaft. Now we need to, just like we did on the reactor, we need to put a controller port and a place to get RF out of. So there's a turbine controller. We'll put that here. Close up our little magic hole. And it's happy. You'll see that the structure was satisfied with this basic layout. We still need to get power out of it, so we need a turbine redstone flux port. And we're actually going to hook this up to one of our Wyvern Energy IO crystals so that when it does start producing energy, we can be sending it into our power grid. So that was a shift right click and then a right click to connect it to our energy cell up there. So now we have, when we right click on the turbine control, you can see that here is our turbine, but we're not done. We need to provide water to the reactor and then give the reactor the ability to send the steam that it produces as a result of superheating that water to the turbine. So we're going to put a bunch of coolant ports on the reactor to start with. And we're going to do this the super fast, cheaty way. Okay, the other thing that I learned is it does not work to put your coolant ports underneath the reactor through the casing. I found that the place that works is to break one piece of glass right next to our gelid cryotheum. So we're going to do one here and plop one in there. So these are the reactor coolant ports. And then we're going to do another one. Oh no, we only need one on this side. My bad. Sorry. Thanks. Okay, we just need one. And in order to provide it water, I'm going to use the sinks from Cooking for Blockheads because they are a great source of water. You could also use the aquatic accumulator from Thermal Foundation or any other water source block. I think Ender.io also has a nice infinite water source system. We're going to use Ender level fluid conduits to do this. They are made using the vibrant alloy, fused quartz, and some conduit binder. So they're a little advanced in Ender.io, but worth it because they're very fast. I've also made 30 speed upgrades for them because it is important to provide water to... It's important to provide water to the reactor at a good rate. Okay, so this port is set to be input. And we want to insert water from here, not extract. So that was the setting on the end of the Ender IO fluid conduit. These, however, need to be set to extract, and we need to make sure they're always active. So we're providing water to the reactor from these 3 sinks. So now when we go look at the reactor interface, it should have changed, and now we have a coolant fluid tank and a hot fluid tank. That's where our steam will come out, and then it'll tell us how much hot fluid it's outputting. So instead of electricity, or instead of RF, it's producing steam, right? And we're going to use that steam to generate even more RF. So we need to extract that steam from the reactor and give it to our turbine. So we're going to do that with 2 ports, because remember I said we had to have this system that goes from one to the other and then back again in kind of a round robin. In order to change whether or not a coolant port is import or export, you can just right click it with the Extreme Reactors wrench. So now let's see how that changed to red. That now will extract steam and provide it somewhere. And the somewhere it's going to be provided to is here on our turbines. So we're going to make 2 turbine fluid ports. So we're going from this port down to our turbine. And before we hook this up, we want to change this turbine port to be, insert, right? Extert, insert, then this one's going to be out and in. Okay, the colors are a little confusing. Just make sure the arrows are either pointed out or pointed in. Then we slap our Ender IO fluid conduit, and that's going to be an insert on this side. So we're taking water from steam from the reactor extract and putting it into the turbine, right? Now we want to complete that circuit. We want to take the steam that's been turned back into water from, so extracting from the turbine and put it back into the reactor. Ta-da! This one becomes insert. So we now have our closed system of fluids coming out, steam coming out of the reactor into the turbine. The turbine uses the steam to turn the rotor once we activate it and converts the steam back into water and sends that cooled water back to the reactor to be superheated again. So eventually we'll be able to turn off this fresh water input into the reactor, but I'm going to leave it there for now while we start things up. So our reactor looks like it's a valid complete, so we can open the controls. And our turbine is valid. We can open the controls here as well. So let's start them up. Let me make sure I have, yes, we have fuel in the reactor. Here we go. Now the reactor is going to run hot for this. And we're going to go down here and turn on the turbine, and as we turn it on and it fills with steam, it's a very cool visual effect. That rotor will start spinning because of the blades. The faster the rotor spins, the more RF we get. So you can see our RF starts at 700 and it's going up. Our RPMs, that's revolutions per minute on the rotor blade, are also going up. An ideal turbine runs at either 900 revolutions per minute or 1800. You don't want it to go above 2000 because it could catastrophically fail. That would be bad. So it's slowly going to go up. And if you recall, when we just had the reactor, I think we were getting about 9,000 a tick. For RF, 9,000, 11,000. With this, we should get right at 20,000 RF a tick. This should double our power by having a turbine. Okay, and it looks like we're good on water. We have this set to only venting the overflow. I can close the vent and you can see it'll fill up with steam. And then I'm opening it again and it'll balance that steam. Hold that. The coils are engaged. That means the coils are producing RF. And it takes quite a while for a turbine to come up to speed in terms of its power production. We want to check our reactor again. Okay, here it's kind of leveled out. It's producing 1600 millibuckets per tick of steam, which is great. And it's hot, but it's not getting any hotter. It's kind of found its little happy medium. Really hot, that means it's going to consume fuel about twice as fast, but we're going to get twice as much power out of it. So if I go down here, the other setting that's very important in here is the amount of flow rate that's coming through the turbine. So you can hold down shift and change this. I'm going to lower this to 1600. In fact, I'm going to lower it to 5 millibuckets below 1600. Let's see if we can get a good balance. Because what we're trying to do is not process more steam than the reactor can produce. We want it optimized, right? We want 100% efficiency. So it's there. See it leveled out at about 2405 steam. So it's about producing about 1595. It's handling 1595 millibuckets a tick. And we'll keep an eye on the RPM. And the RF, since that's what we really care about. Our goal is to be producing a great deal more RF than we had been. And as long as this number keeps going up, I'm very happy. Okay, now we're going to add speed upgrades to the extraction pieces. So I've added 15 speed upgrades so that we're pulling the steam out of the reactor faster. And then we want to pull the water out of the reactor faster at the other end of the cycle. And let's see what that does for our millibuckets a tick in terms of what it's producing. Okay, it lowered it a tiny bit. Oh, so it's matching it to the limit that we have on here. So let's see if we can go up. Okay, so I tweaked the flow rate, and then I turned both the reactor on and off, and then the turbine on and off again in order for the new settings to take effect. What we want to see is the RPM and the RF stabilize at a reasonable rate, around 1800 RPM, and we'll just see what kind of RF we get at that point. It's going even faster now. I think we're up to, 1600 RPM, producing 15K RF a tick and still climbing. The system is closed. I did turn off the new water supply. So I'm hoping that this stabilizes right around 1800 RPM. Fingers crossed. We're almost there. The good news is that RPM is slowly coming down, or slowly slowing down. And our power, look at that 19.5K RF per tick. It's already about 9K more per tick than we were getting with just the reactor alone. It should level out right above 20K, given how much the RPM has slowed down. Fingers crossed, we've gotten enough water in there that our steam cycle is going to stabilize. That's the hope. Okay, let's go back and check on our turbine to see if things have leveled out. Now we've given it a few minutes. Fingers crossed. Oh, it's still going up a tiny bit. Oh, that's good though. That's pretty stable. Hanging out right at 1800 RPM. That's what we're looking for. Our RF is still creeping up. Let's lower our max flow rate. So lowering our max flow rate decreases the rotor speed. Increasing the max flow rate raises the rotor speed. We want to stabilize it. It's still kind of creeping up. So let's bring it down maybe 5 millibuckets. Oh, and now our RF started falling. Okay, let's take it up 3. And it's slowing down. Maybe up one more. There we go. That's what we're looking for, a stable RF per tick, which means that our rotor speed shouldn't change at all. And we are great. It's at 1800, 2.2 RPM, which means we're not going to have any burnout or excess heat or whatever. So our closed system is producing 20,814 RF per tick. That's a lot of power. As long as we keep providing it with uranium, which we're growing using mystical agriculture, we will have 20,000 RF a tick forever. I love it. Okay, I think that's everything that we have time for today's episode. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like. It helps me out and I appreciate it. If you'd like to keep up with what's going on the channel, don't hesitate to subscribe. And in the meantime, remember, you are the shiny stuff that awesome is made of. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.